Making an impact this week, terror in Turkey. The recent attack in Istanbul has security experts weighing in on the impact here in South Florida at our airports. What you need to know before taking off this summer. Now on Impact, the world feels smaller than ever, and when terrorists strike at Istanbul, the effects are felt around the globe, including right here in South Florida. Joining me now on Impact to discuss the security concerns this summer, security expert Wayne Black and Ruben Mena, Vice President of AFIMAC Global. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here on Impact. Wayne, thanks for returning.
Happy to be here.
So another attack, another country, this time Istanbul, Turkey, and its main airport. Wayne, you actually flew out of Ataturk Airport in Turkey this past week. Did you see anything suspicious, any lack of security, anything that would raise a red flag to you?
Not at all. It's a tight airport. It's probably more secure than any airport I've ever been to in this country. Their lockers are plexiglass. You can see right through them. They check bags on the outside. We were there for 6 hours, and it looked fine.
Ruben, it looks like these attacks are becoming more frequent around the world, and we usually look at it Turkey, Brussels, in other parts of the world, but we've seen some of those attacks here in our own country, in San Bernardino, and of course in Orlando not too long ago. ISIS has declared a caliphate 2 years ago, so we're seeing these attacks. Is this country prepared for these type of attacks?
Jackie, unfortunately, because we live in a free society, and those freedoms have a price to pay, and that is the limited availability of us being able to confront potential threats such as this. So it becomes more difficult for us to be able to identify and challenge those individuals. That's why more often you see the folks coming out and saying, hey, if you see something, say something, because we don't have enough resources in law enforcement to be able to cover everybody.
Wayne, you're familiar with the Ataturk airport. There were 3 individuals, suicide bombers, that went to that airport, 3 different locations, blew themselves up. Is there anything that you saw from that airport that could have had a different outcome, something that security there could have done differently to avoid this tragedy?
Not at all. You know, let's look at who they are. It's a Chechen plan. Right, so Chechen separatists, they've been doing this. Remember, the Boston Marathon bombers are Chechen. So they had a good plan.
You say Chechen because we now know that there was a Russian and 2 members of the former Soviet states as well.
Yeah, but the Chechens, look, they've been fighting the Mongols back, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So they know what they're doing. They've been angry at Russia. They've been angry at who they think are oppressors. So this is what they do. And we see them in Pakistan and various other places. But they're here in the United States. Boston Marathon is a perfect example. So I'm wondering what our pain threshold is. When are we going to keep them busy where they live instead of having them keep us busy where we live? So that's, I think, part of our issue, a lack of engagement.
But that's an interesting issue, because when you talk about the lone wolf theory, like what happened in Orlando, how do you combat something like that? Because that's pretty much a homegrown person in the name of ISIS that did the worst massacre in U.S. history, with 49 people killed in Orlando.
Well, you know, lone wolf is a politically correct term, depending on what the narrative is from the government at the time, to make us feel better. So here's a guy that's communicating with ISIS. ISIS claimed him. He claimed them. So the fact that he did it by himself doesn't necessarily make him a lone wolf. It's the ideology of terror, and he had it, whether it's one person or 100 people.
And you guys that are in security, how can you detect something like that, or someone that has those tendencies?
It's very difficult, Jackie. They've got to look at profiles and you know, it's that all profiling, but to find the minutia that can say, hey, the psychological identification of these types of people are very difficult. They're very difficult. We look at different ways of trying to identify and being proactive towards this type of identification with the FBI profilers and so on and so forth, but in real time, in real life, it's very difficult.
Wayne, it goes to show that ISIS ambitions are in fact global. Islamic fanaticism seems to be growing. The administration's plan right now against ISIS, is it working?
Absolutely not. I mean, I can't even articulate what the plan is. It's reactive in nature. Look, these guys recruit based on success. And the more we give them soft targets, the more we don't go after them. Look at Inspire magazine. It looks like an IBM annual report. And it just came out, another one lauding the attacks in Orlando. And they recruit based on that. So until we stop that, until we, unfortunately I have to say this, until we capture or kill them where they live, they're going to continue to attack us.
Ruben, would you agree that the strategy?
I agree 100%. Not only that, but you have soft targets, as we call them, around the world. We've got the Olympics coming up, Rio. And even though we may be doing everything we can security-wise to shore that up, you know, us with our clients in our company, we've got folks out there that are going to be attending some of these soft targets, and I don't want to get into specifics about security measures being taken, but it's not the hard targets that are going to be targeted by the you know, ISIS and ISIL type folks. They're not dumb. They're going after the soft targets, and the majority represent U.S. interests.
Well, where was the disconnect or the failures? Because at least in the case of Orlando, Mateen, he had already been investigated twice, for that matter. So what happened?
Well, I think it's a matter of sheer numbers. I mean, the FBI does a great job at this, and it's their number one priority. But when you think of the amount of open cases, thanks to our failed immigration policy and a bunch of things, I predict there's probably 25 to 1, 25 cases to one FBI agent. So we only have so many, and they can only do so much. So they go after the low-hanging fruit. I mean, they did a great job in Aventura by stopping that attack recently. So they're, you know, they're very, very good, but they can't be everywhere.
Ruben, I asked you before if this country is prepared, because it's not like Israel. They've been dealing with this kind of stuff for years and years and years. In the case of Orlando, the response, there has been a lot of people questioning the response to what was happening in that club in Orlando, 3 hours. What do you think happened there? Was that a failure, or is that typical?
Jackie, I don't think it was a failure. I believe that the scene commander did an outstanding job, and that's, again, my personal and professional opinion only, but I think he did an outstanding job because of the amount of information that you're getting in fractions of seconds, much conflicting information, and you've got to be able to dissect what is valid, what is not valid. And remember, this commander or whoever the person was that was running the shop has to consider the safety not only of the victims that are inside, but also of his men that he's going to be sending in there in the light of all these information that were being provided to him, such as the subject had explosives, he had additional people, there were hundreds of shots being fired, many of which people didn't know if there were multiple shooters. So the time frame, and again, I wasn't there, I'm not able to second guess anybody, but in my professional opinion, I think they did the best that they could with the circumstances that were being given to them at the time.
This is 4th of July weekend. A lot of people will be traveling this weekend. We have to talk about our local airports. We have 2 big airports here, Miami International Airport in Florida and Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. We saw the airport massacres in Brussels and again in Turkey. Do you think that our airports now are prepared for something like this? Are they being extremely vigilant, especially a long weekend like this one?
I think they're better prepared. They're better prepared than we were 2 days ago. Okay, and the reason I say better prepared is because they have more manpower, more eyes, trained to try to identify anything that looks suspicious. Plus, people trained to be able to confront these guys, like the attackers in Turkey that came through they were running in already shooting.
Yeah.
Wayne, would you agree with that?
I would. I mean, without going into details, Miami and Fort Lauderdale do things that other airports don't do. So we're really lucky. I mean, they're doing some really advanced security measures that of course, we don't talk about, but I think we're lucky to be here.
Interesting on a side note, because I traveled to Europe the past couple of weeks, and they didn't make us take off our shoes over there, and that is standard operating procedure here in the United States. You automatically take your shoes off. Do you think that training has changed significantly in this country, especially for TSA and security around the airports?
All that means is their X-ray machines go lower and can X-ray your shoes at the same time. That's all that means. Ours have a little higher platform. That's the reason we take off our shoes.
But that's one example.
Yeah.
So Ruben, do you think that that TSA is more properly trained for these type of incidents?
Well, I think unfortunately, every time we have an incident, you know, the guy with the explosive in his underwear, the guy with the explosive in his shoes, we add that to our menu of potential threats. So therefore, until we can go in there and eliminate those possibilities, be it via X-rays or via direct handling of it, I think that's going to stay in place. And every little bit that we add to our security increases our protective level.
And finally, how can we as travelers be more prepared and aware of our surroundings, of what's happening, and what can we do to protect ourselves?
Well, I think that you just have to put up with the security. I mean, it's the way we live now, and stop complaining. I mean, before 9/11,
The new normal, right? I mean, we hate to say it,
that's
but
right.
it
It's the
really
new
is.
normal. Before 9/11, that was the problem with the FAA. They were both the cheerleaders for aviation and the security, and they had that inherent conflict. So now you just get there early and you put up with it, and you hope that they give you a good check.
Interesting, because just a couple of months ago, many of the airlines were complaining because of the long wait times in TSAs affecting the travelers, not making flights, so on and so forth. And then something like this happens, and you think, well, you know, it is worth it. The extra security is worth it.
Absolutely.
Of course it is. It always is. We have that push and shove. Look, security is something. We want security. We don't want to see it. We want security. We don't want to pay for it. Well, guess what? It's a new world. It's going to be part of our lives.
Yes, unfortunately.
We're a necessary evil.
Unfortunately, it is, as we mentioned, the new normal. Wayne and Ruben, thank you so much. We love your insights on this specific issue. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.